Sergeant at Arms, please secure the doors. Members, please take your seats. The invocation from earlier today will serve as today's invocation, but if we could have the clerk please call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 46 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is now again in session. Senators, if we have just a small we have this rules report that we'd like to be able to get to the committees. So if we could potentially just special order the bill that we're on for about 3 minutes. If the majority leader agrees with that motion, a majority leader would special order the bill for 3 minutes. And we will take up the report from the Committee on Rules. This is report number 2. The clerk will read the first 2 bills.
Senate Bill 877, the President Annual Corrective Bill. This is an emergency bill. Senate Bill 878, the President Annual Curative Bill. This is an emergency bill.
All right, Senators, these are bills that come out of the Rules Committee. We don't want to deal with these right this second. So the majority leader moves to special order these 2 bills until the appropriate time tomorrow. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 927, Senator Pinsky, Institution of Higher Education, Prohibition Against Incentive Payments, Foreign Student Exemption to Education, Health, and Environment.
All right, majority leader moves so be considered the reading of the bills. The bills on this calendar, Senators, will now be referred to the appropriate standing committees. So we just want to make sure that those can start moving down the pipeline. All right, so our administrative duties are complete. Let's go back now to our where we were when we left off for our recess. If the clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 178, Senator Carter, Public Information Act, Personnel Records Investigation of Law Enforcement Officers, Anton's Law.
All right, Senators, Senate Bill 178 is on second reader and is open to amendment. Are there? Yes. Chair recognizes the Senator from Baltimore County. Does the Senator have an amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have an amendment to propose.
Senator has an amendment. Could the Senator please read the amendment number?
It's Amendment 633-328/1.
Amendment 633-328/1. Do we have it up? Is it up? 633-328/1. All right, looks like it is up. Everyone have it on computers? Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's really a very simple amendment. Wherever the word police or officers appears in the underlying bill, Senate Bill 178, we add the words "and General Assembly" or and members of the General Assembly. That's it.
All right, Senator has moved the amendment. Chair recognizes the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. While I can appreciate the sentiment behind the amendment, I would ask that the body resist this amendment. I touched on this a little bit earlier. It's really not in the spirit of the bill. We didn't have bill hearings on public officials, elected officials, members of the General Assembly, ethics complaints. We didn't have testimony on that. We didn't have any witnesses on that. And so I would say that that is an idea we could take up, but it should be a separate piece of legislation. In fact, I mentioned earlier that this body, or at least the House of Delegates, did hear a bill on this in 2018, House Bill 48, which the House committee voted unanimously to defeat in 2018. So I would urge the body to resist this amendment.
All right, question is on the amendment. Any further discussion? Chair recognizes the Senator from District 4.
Mr. President, could I explain why?
Senator moved the amendment. When other members have talked about the amendment and who have not yet spoken, we'll come back to the maker of the amendment. Yes?
I'll gladly yield to the maker of the amendment.
Senator, you can ask the Senator a question. If not, we can go to the Senator from District 5.
If the senator from Baltimore County would explain your amendment and the justification for it.
All right, well, go ahead, Senator.
If that's
Feel free.
appropriate. So thank you, Mr. President. During the hearing on this bill, I noted down several of the arguments made on behalf of the bill by its sponsor. She referred to, I'm quoting now, the mythological aspect of potential harm coming to officers whose information is disclosed. She claimed that those law enforcement officers who have integrity will be more comfortable in their work knowing that unfounded complaints can be filed against them at any time and that those complaints will be made public. And she also argued that it can be to the benefit of a law enforcement officer to be the subject of a complaint made public that is not sustained. And I got to thinking, if we believe that our police departments are hotbeds of corruption and undisciplined, unprofessional conduct, and that we need to clean out the Augean stables by making public all complaints filed against our men and women in blue, whether there's any merit to them or not, we should apply the exact same rule to the Maryland General Assembly. Certainly, the General Assembly has not been a model of propriety in the last several years. Multiple delegates have gone to jail for corruption, and even a state senator has gone to jail for corruption. Who knows what other bad conduct is hidden away in the files of the Ethics Committee? Just as the public has a legitimate interest in police misconduct, the public has an equally legitimate interest in misconduct by the legislators that they elected to represent them in Annapolis. And for those who would say that many of the complaints assigned to the Ethics Committee were investigated and found to be non-meritorious, and that making such complaints public would only injure the reputations of honest career public officials, I respond in the words of the sponsor of the bill. Any concern felt by a member of the General Assembly about harm to his or her reputation from the public disclosure of unfounded complaints filed against the legislator is merely mythological. Any legislator who has integrity will be more comfortable in his or her work, knowing that unfounded complaints can be filed against him or her at any time and that these complaints will be made public. And finally, it can actually be to the benefit of a legislator to be the subject of complaints that are made public and find their way onto the front page of the newspapers so long as the complaints are ultimately not sustained. There's an old phrase, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. And if we're going to subject men and women across the state who put their lives on the line every day to protect us to the public disclosure of complaints filed against them, which after investigation turn out to be meritless, the least we can do is subject ourselves to the same level of public scrutiny. I urge a favorable report on this amendment.
All right. Any further senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? If not, on the amendment, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay.
Roll call.
Senators requested a roll call. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote.
I'd like to explain my vote, Mr. President.
Yes, Senator has 2 minutes to explain his vote.
The senator from Baltimore County did an excellent job laying this out. The justification why we needed to treat police officers different than other public employees was that they have power. I would argue members of the General Assembly have more power than almost any public employees. And then the argument was because of corruption. Well, just to bring up that point, in 2020, we had a delegate who was sentenced to 6 months in prison on federal charges of misusing campaign donations. In 2020, another delegate who was charged with taking over $33,000 in bribes. We had in 2018, one of our Senate colleagues was sentenced for prison time. In 2017, we had two delegates who were charged, convicted of bribery and conspiracy charges. So I would say that it's very much in order for us that those who live in glass houses should not throw stones.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes Senator from District 5 has 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm voting green on this excellent amendment. It spotlights the key issue of why so many of us tried to amend this bill in the last amendment, because we all don't think anybody has any objection to the idea that if someone is found to have actually done something wrong as a police officer, then they've found to have been in violation of what they were supposed to be doing, or found to commit a crime, or anything along those lines. That none of us have an objection to that being open in public view. But when we allow for spurious accusations that are found to be unfounded or unsustained to go, we're talking about people who don't have any real power as a police officer. We heard about how police officers are so powerful, but your average nameless and faceless police officer, they don't have any power against a public relations machine that could get turned up against them because someone decides that they found that they want to make an example of them. But we're not willing to expose ourselves to that same risk, and we have a little bit more of a megaphone. So this amendment is, I can't say it any better than the gentleman from Baltimore County, the maker of the amendment. He outlined it very clearly the same arguments that were used to say that we should expose rank-and-file police officers who have unsustained complaints to the kind of public scrutiny that we're exposing them to with this bill. We should be willing to expose ourselves to that as well. And I'm disappointed with the way it looks on the board, but I strongly support this amendment, and I think it's a common sense statement. Let's have ourselves be exposed in the same way that we're making these police officers be exposed to public torment for something that they've been found to not have been guilty of or has been found to be unsustained.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes Senator from District 6 with 2 minutes to explain your vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll make this real quick. Being a public servant, that's what we are. They are public servants also. We are set in a place of a higher standard. To me, that says a lot, because we are accountable for many people for their voices. And there's nothing wrong in any way, shape, or form with this amendment putting us in a place, just as a police officer, than making us accountable. I think accountability is a very important thing, and I'm willing to put my green vote there for this amendment, and I appreciate the sponsor for this amendment. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any further senators wish to explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 30 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none.
Mr. President.
I'm sorry. Yes, Senator from 29th District has an amendment. The number of the amendment, Senator.
113327-1.
113327. 113327. Give us just a moment, Senator. This is where we mostly miss our pages. All right, should be up. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill involves the conduct of a police officer. And we are painting a picture of a pattern of that officer. Well, here's a thought. What do we think that we do with positive community feedback in a personnel file? We want to know the bad things, but why not the positive things? Put yourself in their position. This bill, as written, wants to find the reputation and patterns of the officer, and its intent is to weed out the bad, the troublesome, the corrupt officers. This amendment does not change this bill. It simply adds additional transparency to the process. It's exactly what we want to do. We want to add transparency. The amendment before you does two things. First, it requires the law enforcement agency to maintain a record of positive community feedback for all law enforcement officers within the police agency. Secondly, the records are subject to public inspection in accordance with the Maryland Public Information Act. So what the bill was intended was to learn about the officer's reputation. Well, then let's learn about the reputation. This would allow both positive and negative reports and information to be released and reviewed. This would give a clearer picture of the officer's whole reputation and the reputation of the officer on the community. In law enforcement, an officer's future depends on their reputation. It depends on their character. And a lot of people rate them based on the patterns that they hear about them. I believe that what we're doing here in police reform, as we all know, is being watched by the entire nation. We have worked very diligently and tirelessly on police reform. There are bad apples in all occupations. What this amendment does is recognize that any police officer can make a mistake, and it doesn't excuse that mistake. But it is more than just a snapshot of a potentially bad act. This amendment would provide a total picture of these officers' reputation and that officer's future career potential. Let's remember that these are our first responders, the men and women who protect our families and our communities. We should be thinking about recruitment, retention, and the future policing in our communities. These are the people who are willing to give their lives every day for our constituents. I request that the body support this amendment and join me in voting favorably on what I hope is viewed as a friendly amendment that would provide additional transparency in police reform.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Chair recognizes the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can really appreciate the spirit with which this amendment is made. In Baltimore City, for example, they're already required to report their community policing efforts and put them on the website, and unsolicited, they choose to put commendations and good acts and good programs on the website as well. So there's no prohibition from a police department disclosing good information about officers or commendations. But this bill is specifically actually not about, as the senator said,